what it sounded like.
The number of us that were watching it unfold.
Thank you.
No problem.
The regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. I'm Jacob Sherman, all here by myself with a few of my commissioners online. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You can locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you haven't reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. The City of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and our gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Our second order of business is meeting minutes, but we don't have any. And so on to 3.0, any informational items from staff?
No, I do have a few things. I just wanted to alert everyone that the Neighborhood Hubs community outreach is taking place over the next couple of weeks. There's 3 conversations with neighborhood associations, and there's also 3 larger conversations. And so I would just encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about where we are with the neighborhood hubs, to go to the city's website, and it'll tell you where the 6 different meetings are, and you're welcome to attend any of those meetings. I encourage folks to come out. It's pretty exciting. We've been talking to a lot of folks. And then also just wanted to let everybody know that the first Transportation System Plan Advisory Committee meeting is being held on Thursday, October 19th, here in our new City Hall building on the first floor from 6 to 8. We've got a committee, but folks are welcome to attend that and hear, kind of be at the kickoff and learn about the project and get up to speed with everything. And then if you do have comments to share, we will have a public comment period during that meeting. And with that, thank you.
Great. And am I correct in remembering that Commissioner Edge is our Planning Commission representative on the?
That is correct.
Great.
Yes.
So I think as other planning commissioners, if you have any questions or want to talk about anything, connect with Commissioner Edge, who I know is very receptive to that, and you can feel free to share any ideas. And I think, as you were saying, the Neighborhood Hubs workshops on the community calendar on the website. I noticed, though, that there was a request to RSVP. Do you know if there's going to be caps on that? Should people get in while?
I will tell you that there was originally a request to RSVP, so if you did, thank you so much. If you did not, it's okay. Please come to the event. We'd love to see you there.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. Great. Anything else? I guess that's from staff. Anything else from staff? No? Great. Audience participation. This is an opportunity for audience members to comment on items not on the agenda. Do we have any audience members tuning in remotely?
We do not.
We do not. I don't know if our audience members here, if you wish to comment on anything not on the agenda. Nope. Moving on. 5.0 Community Involvement Advisory Committee. At this point of our agenda, the Planning Commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Does staff have any updates to report, or do any CIAC members have anything to report?
I will just share that we've been going out to the neighborhood associations, the NDAs, to do a land use training part 2, and we've gone to all of them, and we have one left, and they finally got it scheduled, and it's happening tomorrow night. So after that, we will have been to all of the NDAs for that second part of the land use training.
Anything, Commissioner Freeman, Mulhorn, Edge? These chairs are extra comfortable. I'll just remind folks online how much better it is in real person. And the background image here, the nice Milwaukie with dogwoods on it, can't see it. There we go. It's also very fashionable. So I'll continue on from the helm of the Starship Enterprise, I believe it was referenced earlier. To our first hearing item, which is 6.1, the community service use for Milwaukie High School parking modification. This is file number CSU 2023-004. The purpose of the application is to modify parking requirements of the community service use for Milwaukie High School on the property located at 2301 Southeast Willard Street. The public hearing is called to order. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the city's zoning, subdivision ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and any applicable municipal code provision, and that the proposal conforms with the city's applicable criteria. I would like to ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the criteria can be found.
The applicable sections are Milwaukie Municipal Code, Chapter 19.600, off-street parking and loading, Section 19.904, community service uses, and Section 19.1006, Type 3 review.
Great. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address a criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes appeal to the City Council based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response also precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party with standing may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council. Persons with standing are those who submit comments or testify. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. Take a breath. Be funny to kind of go through that as like an auctioneer sometime, like as fast as he can. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Seeing none. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or a potential conflict of interest? No. Does any member of the commission wish to report on any ex parte contacts? Seeing none, hearing none. Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to this hearing please raise their hand? For any of those commissioners who visited the site, did you speak to anyone or note anything different from what was indicated in the staff report for the application? None. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? Seeing none. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter? Also shaking heads no. Well then, let's proceed to the staff report.
All right. Good evening. I'm Chair Sherman and Commissioners in Virtual Land, Brett Calver, Senior Planner with the City of Milwaukie, and I'm going to share my screen and be walking you through this application. So let me just get that going here. All right, so the hearing this evening is to consider modifications to a community service use approval for the Milwaukie High School related to its parking requirements. And just to set the stage for context a little bit, the high school campus, although it is just under 15 acres, is relatively compact, and it is squeezed into an area just between the south part of our downtown and some of the residential areas kind of in that part of the town. The school currently has a capacity physically of about 1,500 students, although the enrollment's not that level currently, and at last report around 110 faculty and staff. And those two figures are part of what had been the primary basis for the calculation of required parking. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. The high school campus has a long history, dating back to the early to mid 20s, and it has been an evolving work in progress. And I'm just listing a few of the major modifications that have happened on the school campus over time. You can note that a few of those have involved kind of an ongoing effort to establish more off-street parking, and the school has been fairly successful at that over time, including that the most recent project was the major renovation that replaced the historic classroom building with a new building that involved the development of quite a bit of additional off-street parking. And as I know all the commissioners are familiar, the school is a community service use. This is a type of conditional use like a church. There's no zone for these particular uses, and so they're reviewed as a type of conditional use in the zone, and they're required to demonstrate compliance with some of the approval criteria that are in this section that's cited here. Overall, the idea is that the use needs to demonstrate that it's appropriate for the site, that any impacts that are caused by the operation of it are mitigated somehow, and there's always a measure of the benefits to the public versus any impacts that happen. And that's the case with the school here, and that's been the consideration over time for every project that the school has done. And what the current proposal that you're discussing this evening is to essentially revisit some of the requirements that have been in place in the past for parking. One of them over time, because according to the city's code requirements for minimum off-street parking that have been in place for a long time, the school was always underparked. So it always had fewer spaces available on site than the code required. And one of the ways the school had dealt with that was by arranging some shared parking agreements with a couple of neighboring churches. In addition, a past condition of approval involved the school being required to establish and maintain what was called a Transportation Demand Management Program, or we use the acronym TDMP. And part of that was supposed to involve an ongoing effort to continually study and monitor the demand for parking on the campus, and to look at promoting alternate mode options for students, including, specifically called out over time was an effort to try to promote carpooling. And that was all just to try to reduce the demand, and a way to kind of justify continuing to allow the school to function without providing the minimum required number of on-site spaces. There's supposed to be a transportation resource center developed, and the whole effort was supposed to be coordinated by a committee that was formed, comprised of students, faculty, and staff. So those are the requirements that the applicant team has proposed to revisit and retire, essentially. And the rationale for those requests are that, as I noted before, over time the school has continued to try to provide more off-street parking, and they've done that. And the counts they've conducted for usage are showing that they're actually, the parking is now underused, that on any given school day, there could be up to a third of the spaces on site are not actually in use. And so that's led to the school district wanting to consider kind of ending the shared parking agreements that it's been paying for, because they're not for free with these adjacent churches. All of this is in the context of some relatively new rules that have happened at the state level related to what's called Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities, or CFEC, another acronym. And that's where on the state level, cities are now prohibited from enforcing a minimum required parking where a site is near some transit options. And for the city of Milwaukee, given our size and the transit options that we have in town, that means that more or less most of the city, except for a few small pockets, now fall into this category where we're not able to require minimum parking. What that means for a more conditional type of use, like a community service use like the school, is that it is still appropriate to consider whether there are impacts that result from these new rules, and in particular from the request to discontinue the TDMP requirement. And that's essentially what the task is here this evening, is to evaluate that question. Are there additional impacts that need to be mitigated if the request to, in particular, to retire the TDMP requirement was to be approved? And I guess in short, staff's conclusion is that that it is appropriate to retire those previous requirements. We have not received complaints about parking in the area. I know that earlier, prior to or in conjunction with the development of light rail, there was a lot of concern in the neighborhood in general about what light rail would do to impact that, and most of those concerns have not really come to fruition, and on a daily basis we don't hear complaints about parking at the school. So with all that in mind, and keeping in mind that as an ongoing community service use, if we were to hear complaints, or there were to be some kind of a change or problem that arose we would have the ability and would take the action to, discuss the issue with the school. Depending on what was proposed, it was a pretty major modification. It might actually come before the Planning Commission for consideration. And so our feeling is that there are avenues in place to address any problems if they should arise. And our recommendation is to approve the request as it was made with the findings that we provided. So with that in mind, I'll just ask if there are any questions as you consider kind of the standard slate of options for you about approving what's been proposed with the findings that are in the packet. If you want to make some modifications to them, we can consider those. We do have, according to the land use clock, until late December to issue a final decision, which would include appeals to the City Council. But you could continue the hearing if you think you need more time, or if your discussion leads you in a direction of wanting to deny the application, we just need to make some findings in accordance with that. So with that in mind, I'll ask if there are any questions.
Great. Any clarifying questions for staff?
Yes, I have some.
Yeah, jump on in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thanks for the presentation, Brett. And, I understand, that, kind of the rationale behind this. Just wondering, particularly in light of Comprehensive Plan Policy 10.7.6, which reads, establish a transportation demand management program for schools and other large institutions and businesses. What is our ability to amend perhaps approve in part, so that we would amend the condition or the permit so that they would not have to maintain the parking agreements with the churches, but would need to maintain the TDM program in line with the comprehensive plan policies.
Well, the only thing
would we be allowed to do that?
I think if it's all right if I just comment on that, I think that that comprehensive plan policy could be, and I wasn't here when it was written, but I will say that it seems to me that should say when necessary or needed, that we would not be just implementing TDM programs for a variety of things if there wasn't a need for those TDM programs. That would be my interpretation of that policy. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer for you, Commissioner Edge, but
yeah, that's fine. I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for that perspective. And then I guess just procedurally, would we be allowed to approve the amended agreement? I mean, or are we just looking at what is being put in front of us and approving or denying the total package?
Well, as I understand it, I mean, yeah, the commission is empowered because you're supposed to be evaluating kind of the impacts versus benefits and assessing the situation to see whether the request is approvable without any further mitigation. That is, retiring in this case, the request to retire the TDMP. It seems to me that if you were to you could establish some findings to keep the TDM requirement if you felt that there were impacts that needed to be mitigated. I guess that's how we've been considering it and framing it in this end, that with the understanding that at this point there aren't additional impacts that are needing mitigation.
I think maybe just to chime in, I'd say, at the bottom of page 7 in our packet and page 9 of the PDF, I think that's kind of articulated by staff in the report. Since the TDMP does not itself require off-street parking, the CIAC rules do not prevent it from being a tool at the city's disposal. The commission could require that the school continue to maintain and operate a TDMP to ensure that students and staff carpool or use alternative modes to get to and from school in an effort to keep school-related parking from generating on-street parking conflicts with adjacent uses. So, it sounds like there could be a pathway there that maybe isn't necessarily how it was proposed in the application. And so, I think to Commissioner Edge's questions, there might be some changes, if that was something the commission wanted to discuss further, but maybe want to hold from that discussion and see if there's any other clarifying questions for staff.
Chair Sherman, I just kind of generally, I read through the packet, it didn't seem like there was any kind of monitoring of the TDMP or something like that. So like you mentioned, like you haven't heard any complaints from the public. So is that what triggers the kind of the need to check in the TDM? Just wondering, like you said, like at this point, there's no need for it, but like, I'm just wondering what triggers, that kind of review that we might have to look into whether we need it or not.
Yeah, I think that's a fair portrayal of it, that if, for example, the commission were to decide to approve the request and retire the TDMP requirement, I think that staff would respond to complaints. We would, if we received complaints, we would take the step to consult with the school and see if the complaints were rising to a level of something that couldn't be simply resolved, but additional complaints could be something that would trigger a return to the Planning Commission and kind of a reestablishment of a TDM requirement.
And I think I could add maybe, Commissioner Freeman, the question I believe you're asking is whether or not the TDM would get triggered with something, or how we would kind of follow whether or not the TDM was being monitored. And so the school has been reporting on the TDM program. So it doesn't get triggered by complaints. It's something that we do already. So they have given us a report in the past reporting on the requirements of the TDM.
Okay, so is there like an annual, biannual report? How do the reports come in, and when do those reports come in from the school or from the district? Yeah,
so I think the expectation or assumption would be that there would be annual reporting by the school, and that's something that over time that has not been consistently monitored by staff. I think that if there had been a number of complaints about parking, I think that would have pushed us more to follow up with the school. But I think that certainly between the period of 2007, when the TDM requirement was first put in place with a major project, and 2017, which is when the school came back with the latest large project, there wasn't consistent follow-up by staff of the TDM. And I think, to be fair, since 2017, when the requirement was refreshed with that CSU review, the length of time of the construction project and then the pandemic, I think got us to a point where, again, the school wasn't really in session in the regular way that it had been. And by the time we got to a point of checking back with the school to kind of revisit the, any kind of reporting on the TDM or the status of the TDM, we kind of had gotten to this point of the question arising of, do we need to still be doing this? We think that our parking demand has changed. We'd like to revisit this whole issue. If that helps explain a little bit of the history of that.
That helps, thanks.
Maybe just to follow on with the pointed question in response to Commissioner Freeman. So have we received like one report in the last, since 2007, or has it been a few? Or?
I think there's been a couple of reports.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I had a clarifying question myself about, if a TDMP was eliminated and then a problem were to arise in the future, we could reestablish one. Would that reestablishment of one be something that would occur like only during some sort of land use process, or is that something the city could pick up the phone and say, hey, we've got a lot of complaints and now we're gonna, what's the trigger, I guess I'm wondering there? Would it be when they come in for another building permit, then we could talk about the TDMP, or, get a lot of complaints next Friday and we could then talk about the TDMP?
I'm going to answer casting an eye towards the city attorney and look to see if I stay in bounds on this. But I think the question gets a little bit at the larger concept or principle of how we handle conditional uses and community service uses. That is, in in some cases, it can be pretty clear where there's a hard requirement, like lights need to be off at 9 p.m. And if that doesn't happen, and we get complaints on a regular basis, then it feels like that's something that I believe we could bring an applicant back to the Planning Commission, almost like a kind of a review or a major modification, and consider whether things that were happening at that community service use or conditional use that needed to be addressed with, there's some new impacts or some impacts that aren't being mitigated properly. And I think even though it's not really spelled out very clearly in the code how that kind of return or revisiting mechanism happens, I think that there's probably a little bit of room to interpret, what might be considered a modification, and that a certain type or level of use might rise to that occasion. Another example might be a church that was approved and stated in their proposal that they were going to have 2 services on Sunday and 1 big gathering on Saturday evenings. And at some point, we learned that they're having regular services on Wednesday, or that the level of activity has increased to a point where it feels appropriate to bring them back. So I think that's how we're thinking a little bit, in this case, about the TDM, that if there were consistent complaints about what was happening and made it clear that the activity of this approved use was creating impacts, that they could be brought back to the Planning Commission if it couldn't be resolved in a kind of a more informal way.
Yeah, and I think that the school district and I think that the city and the neighbors could, before we would need to kind of come back with the TDMs, like, let's talk about it. If
Yeah.
there are complaints, because there haven't been complaints,
Yeah.
but if there are complaints, then we know that we have a good partner here. And so that we would try to work through those complaints
Sure.
and see if we can come up with some solutions. And if the problem persisted, I think that we could go back to a TDMP, but we could try to work through those things as a team here
Yeah.
at the city.
I think I was just kind of trying to clarify to make sure we actually had a mechanism we could exercise when and if it was necessary. Any other questions from planning commissioners for staff?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. So I think one piece of the TDMP that strikes me as beneficial is the idea of it promoting alternative transportation options. And so I'm wondering if, in absence of a TDMP, does the school have other initiatives or programs or mechanisms by which they're doing things like promoting alternative transportation options?
We could hold that for the applicant. Great, that sounds good, Commissioner Mulhorn. We'll hold that one for the applicants. Any other clarifying questions for staff? All right. Brett, have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those that are in the packet?
We did get one comment that wasn't reflected in the packet that was just sent to planning commissioners earlier this evening. It was a comment from Teresa Bresaw, who's a neighbor in the Lake Road area.
Great. I did note that Ms. Bresaw mentioned potential parking impacts on the weekends, which wasn't necessarily something talked about in the packet, and maybe the applicant can share what you know about parking demand on the weekends. Well, if there is nothing else there, would the applicant or their representative like to come up and present? Just a friendly reminder, name and city of residence. Don't need your personal address.
Cindy Detchen, Assistant Superintendent, North Clackamas School District. I am a resident of Milwaukie.
Do I need to press this button?
You don't.
Okay. My name is Sam Huck, and I'm a planner with 3J Consulting, and I'm a resident of Westland.
Great. Take it away.
Go ahead and start your.
Yeah, that'd be great.
They've got a presentation.
Oh,
piece.
great. Wonderful.
There are a number of animations included, so I'll be giving Brett some nods
There you
to
go.
click through those. Nothing too crazy, I don't think, though. Okay, thank you. Good evening, Chair Sherman and Planning Commission, city staff. Thank you for the time this evening, and thank you, Brett, for that presentation and your staff report. With me today is the Assistant Superintendent, Cindy Detchen, who will help answer any questions that you might have after this brief presentation. Gonna give a brief overview of the site, the proposal in this application, and how the application meets the review criteria for the CSU modification. And there'll be a quite a bit of overlap with Brett's presentation, so go ahead. So the site is located at Milwaukie High School's campus, shown here in the vicinity map, and highlighted in these red circles are the 2 shared parking agreements that have been required by the previous land use decisions. And here's just the site plan with the aerial overlay. You can go to the next one. Just takes away the aerial. This has the current number of parking spots that are available to the site users on the campus. The site is mostly zoned with the high-density residential zoning designation, with a small portion on the west of the site that is zoned downtown mixed use, or DMU. And as mentioned earlier, the application is for a modification of these conditions of approval from previous CSU land use approvals at the campus. And first, the applicant would like to remove the formerly required shared parking agreements with the 2 churches, shown with those red circles. These parking agreements were previously required as conditions of approval to meet the parking standards at that time at the land use approval. And because these parking standards have now changed, as Brett mentioned, and the campus has consistently not been using the shared parking, they wish to remove that requirement. And secondly, the applicant proposes to remove the TDMP as another condition of approval that was required as a previous land use approval. And just to note, the last TDMP report given to the city was delivered last year. So instead of having any of the shared parking agreements as a requirement, and in the place of the TDMP, the applicant proposes to meet the parking needs on the campus with those existing 282 parking spaces. And now I'm going to speak to the approval criteria, specifically the approval criteria for a CSU modification. List the full criteria includes building setbacks, heights, off-street parking, but because there's no built or physical changes being proposed with this application, I just wanted to highlight the off-street parking requirements are a part of that. As staff mentioned, there's these new rules, the CFAC rules in the state, where the off-street parking requirement minimums can not be enforced. So knowing this, the district has shown that while there's no longer these off-street parking requirements that need to be met, they're meeting the needs of the site users with the existing 282 parking spaces. This number, 282, was confirmed with the most recent as-built drawings from the recent major renovation at the school. And then we confirmed that with aerial photographs, street view photos, and site visits to get that site plan that we have provided. And then over the course of the 2022-2023 school year, the staff counted number of parking spaces that were available on the campus and not being used, and also checked to see if any of the shared parking spaces were being used. And these counts were provided in table 1 of the narrative, but approximately 75 to 90 parking spaces on site out of the 282 were available, and none of the shared parking was being used. This, combined with the known number of students who have access to the district provided transportation on school buses, as well as the number of students who are issued parking permits and transit passes, demonstrates that the off-street parking in those shared parking areas are no longer needed, and that the 282 spaces are meeting the need. And as staff noted in their report and presentation, they don't think there's any negative impacts to the neighborhood if this application was approved and the requirement for the shared parking agreement and the TDMP was removed. Oh, that's the site plan I was just talking about. So B speaks to mainly site to area student ratio, the amount of play areas that are provided maybe at an elementary or middle school, other built things like walkways being required. So this, again, this application doesn't really speak to those approval criteria. So no changes are being proposed to the physical elements of the site, and the existing CSU specific standards will continue to be met. There are no changes being proposed to the hours and the levels of operation at the school, which have remained compatible over the years with the surrounding uses. As staff mentioned, there's been no complaints that either the district or the city has received. The district spoke with the chief of police about this specific issue to clear that. And with any large events, the church parking lots in those shared agreements were not used because of the lease agreements that were signed specifically don't allow students or staff to park in them beyond a certain time limit. And so one of the parking lots had a provision where everyone needed to be out by 4:30 p.m. and the other one was 7 o'clock p.m. So for any large events that happened, past 7 o'clock, which is most football games, for example, those lots were not being used. What else did I want to mention? Oh yeah, that the churches in the shared parking agreements have also not been using the Milwaukie High School parking spaces, none of those 282. It wasn't a two-way agreement. D speaks to any public benefits outweighing negative impacts on the neighborhood. The district really sees this as a cost-saving measure where this money can be directed towards other things that can directly impact student success and student outcomes and better benefit the school or the district, rather than using these funds for parking that's not being utilized, especially when there's enough on the site. So that kind of really gets to the heart of this public benefit. And then given the context of no negative impacts that have been identified or addressed by community members, staff, the chief of police, et cetera, we see this as a public benefit. And E, the location is appropriate for the type of use. Given the context of the MAX line and the available transit in the area, we think the school's location really does, it is appropriate and there is ample parking. I think my next slide has a map of the, yeah, so these are just wanted to highlight the bus lines in the area and then the MAX line that is right there. And I think that is it. I just wanted to highlight with the evening events, we know that there is going to be at most 4 to 5 football games a year. And the district will also know if there's any big events that are going to be coming. And like staff mentioned, they're open to working with the community, and if the need arises, they're open to working with the community and with the city on any specific events or anything that needs to be mitigated. But at this time, we haven't seen any negative impacts, and for that reason, we're requesting the removal of the TDMP and the requirement to keep those shared parking agreements. So thank you, and we'll take any questions now.
Just on that vein, I'd like to add that one of our 4 strategic points in our strategic plan is community engagement. And as a result of that just was implemented this past year, I've been at every first Friday in downtown Milwaukee all summer long. I was at the Historic Milwaukee NDA meeting last night. We've been at farmers markets. We're really trying to engage community, and we hear all of those things at those times. And that's when we're trying to mitigate any concerns or issues. And they haven't been. I mean, it's been a really great two-way opportunity for us to get to know our community better and for our community to get to know us. So I did have a phone call from a neighbor who I don't think sent anything to you. I wish he had. He lives on 27th. His name is Craig, and he told me he lives in the former Wilbur D. Rao house. So some of you may know where that is. And he just had some questions, and when I explained what it was all about, he was very supportive of the school district not paying for leases that we didn't need. And I asked if I could share his comments, and I encouraged him to share them as well. I asked him if he'd ever had any problems, and he said he's never had any, and he loves just watching the football games himself. So that was the only comment I had from public that I wanted to share that you might not have received.
Great, thanks so much. And yeah, I've seen the school district out at more community events, and it's been fun, especially as a parent of children myself. Commissioner Mulhorn, I know that you had a question for the applicant. You want to re-ask that?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for that presentation. That's very helpful. I'm curious, in the absence of a TDMP, does the school have a strategy for encouraging alternative forms of transportation? And particularly, I think active transportation would be of interest.
Yeah, I think just the fact that we provide transportation for about 2/3 of the school's student body to begin with is a huge help. Many of our students ride the school bus transportation. We do offer TriMet passes for those who need it. And as a reminder, Milwaukie High School is also home of Milwaukie Academy of the Arts, which is a public charter school inside the school itself. And that allows students from outside of Milwaukie to attend the school per state law. And any of those students have the opportunity and are encouraged to use public transportation. And many of them do come in either on TriMet buses or through the Orange Line. So we know that that's happening already.
Any other clarifying questions from the commission for the applicants?
Chair, just kind of briefly, so two of the comments that we have received from the public is concerns about parking around events that are happening at the school. Does the school or the district have any kind of specific plan set up for those times? And also, you kind of mentioned that the students are, a lot of students are getting bused in. Are there buses available for student events at nighttime for students to be transported in and out?
I'll take the first one, and it's difficult to know what events the community members were speaking about. We know the big ones, right? The home football games, the homecoming game. Weekends, if there's a large basketball tournament, that can bring in a lot of outside cars as well. One of the things that I've talked to, we have a brand new athletic director this year, is making sure that he sends things out to his renters. A lot of those tournaments are not school events, but they are actual rentals. They are youth programs, to make sure that we are sharing alternative places to park and that there is, in fact, TriMet just adjacent to the school property. We have Milwaukie Elementary just up the street. They could certainly park there. They could park at the Lake Road within certain hours. And so we've been thinking about how to do that a little bit better on our event weekends. I think evenings were covered. We haven't had any complaints to the school. And as Sam mentioned, I did check in with Captain Cheragino, and he has not received any concerns and often attends the games himself.
Okay. And then also the students, do they have bus transportation in the evening?
Thank you for the reminder, that second part. We don't have school transportation for most of those. What we typically bus to the away games, right? Not to the schools themselves. We would likely get into overtime pay and bully complaints if we were to have our drivers driving at night as well. We have certain routes and a bus driver shortage right now. It doesn't mean we can't offer some alternative incentives for TriMet, whatnot. I don't think it's the evening incidences, though, that are causing the community some concern. At least the two emails I saw were more weekend day use and when a local church is having, and I'm guessing this is coming right off of the summer where weddings were happening every summer. I know I have my own doctor is right around the corner from there, and if I had a Saturday appointment, it was a little difficult to get some parking personally, but I noticed that was usually a church event happening at the same time. So I'm not aware of any other evening conflicts.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just was looking over the letter from Teresa Bradshaw. She says, daytime parking seems to be fine. It's the weekends and various events, namely sports. So just assume the sports are happening in the evening, but perhaps they're happening during the day.
Any other questions from the commission for the applicants? Seeing none from Commissioner Edge. I don't think I have any. Great. Well, do we have anyone tuning in online?
We do not.
We do not. So, and there's no one else in the room, so there's no other public testimony. Fast forwarding through the agenda really fast. Well, there we go. The public testimony portion of the hearing on the request to modify parking requirements of the community service use for Milwaukie High School, file number CSU 2023-004 is now closed. Is the commission ready for discussion? I think we are. Commissioner Edge, I'll let you jump in first.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. I find myself in the position of senior commissioner at this point. I was present for the policy making and the deliberations around adoption of comprehensive plan policies and a land use such as Milwaukie High School was forefront on the minds of people who were interested in having in adopting this policy, that 10.7.6, which reads plainly to establish a transportation demand management program for schools and other large institutions and businesses. So I think that there's kind of, in light of that, I think there's a high threshold to be met in order to cancel the TDM plan or a TDM program. So I, certainly open to discussion with the other commissioners, but at this point, I believe that there are advantages to having a TDM program. That even if it's not a parking management program, it's a transportation demand management program, and so it's really supposed to be a comprehensive look at how the school, which is really a large generator of trips on the transportation system, no matter what modes are being used, it's a large generator of trips on the transportation system. And therefore it really would benefit, to have a group of people, particularly including students on a committee that are helping to monitor that and provide input into that, and making sure that overall that how the school is engaging with the transportation system on, for scheduled events or regular, hours of school, is efficient and, is working well for everybody. One thing, a hypothetical that comes into mind, I don't like to do this very often, but I think that having an example is, in this case is helpful. The applicant's report says that they have about 30%, I think, of their spaces available, most of the time, which is, it's actually quite a bit of available space. It's pretty well underused, I would say. And one target that is often looked to be achieved in parking management strategies is to have 15% of your spaces available at any given time. And that's a pretty efficient usage pattern, and makes the best use of, really of the land that you're setting aside for parking. So I can envision, a near future where if this usage pattern persists and we have 30%, they continue to have 30% of their spaces available, that committee, with students might say, hey, we could convert some of this to bicycle parking, or we could convert some of this to a parklet, or we could convert some of this to some other use that benefits the school or the community or the student body or in some way more than having empty parking spaces most of the time, would. And that, I think you lose the opportunity for that discussion when you don't have a TDM program. Those spaces would just sit there empty. And so I think that in order to better serve the whole suite of comprehensive plan policies that we adopted a few years ago, including this one that really calls this scenario out specifically and says that a TDM program should be required here, I think that the total benefit is really pretty huge, and that losing that is there's more to it than simply is there an over demand for the parking supply on the street in the neighborhood. It's not the only problem that we're looking to solve here. So I'm really strongly in favor of approving the requests, amending the conditions to no longer require the parking agreements with the churches. The off-site parking agreements would no longer, be necessary. But I am in favor of retaining the TDM program, and I have a draft finding that succinctly reflects that. So if we so choose that's how we'd like to go, then I have a finding here to offer.
Thanks, Commissioner Edge, and thanks for sharing your perspective on kind of both the TDMP as well as the other component of the application about the shared parking agreements. Commissioner Freeman, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the shared parking agreements as well as the TDMP.
Thanks, Chair. I would say Commissioner Edge spoke pretty thoughtfully. I would agree with several of the points that he made. I think the TDMP could be helpful, just not just the parking, but helpful for now transportation flow. I think it would have been helpful to kind of see a few of the TDMPs. I didn't see any in our packet, but I think it would have been helpful to kind of see some of the past ones. Before we decided to get rid of it, it would have been helpful to kind of see a few of the other ones. But I think I would probably agree with most of the points that Commissioner Edge put forth.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Mulhorn. Any thoughts you care to discuss?
Yeah, thank you. I would pretty strongly agree with the points Commissioner Edge made as well. I think there's a lot of value to the school thinking about transportation outside of the confines of just parking. And while the parking is in a good position now, I don't think that that means that they should cease thinking about ways to plan their transportation and get students transported to school safely and conveniently. I think on the parking on the initial piece, I'm very comfortable with with removing the requirement that they lease out the 2 spaces from the church. But I see the value in continuing to think actively about transportation for the school. And I think I'm not sure the interest of Milwaukie students in particular, but I know in general, it feels like this is also a generation that would be interested in thinking about transportation. And I would expect that there would be some student interest in being involved in a commission like that. And so I think that's something that we should support as well as a city. So I would generally fall in line with the 2 previous commissioners that spoke.
Great. I think I feel okay with the first part of the proposal about the shared parking agreements. I mean, I think the applicant has really shown that the existing on-site parking is sufficient for meeting kind of current demand. I can understand how in the past, especially as the high school was getting redeveloped, community members probably having a lot of anxiety about trips that could be, new trips that could be generated. I think that's just knowing that change often breeds some of that anxiety. And it's good to see a few years later, things are being managed, what sounds like fairly sufficiently. I'll admit I am a little bit torn about the second one, and would be interested in just talking more with those of you on the commission. I think I agree with the spirit of what the 3 of you shared, and I think I just also understand the practical reality of having a requirement and the expense that comes with that requirement when maybe you're not getting a lot of juice for the squeeze. And, I personally, it's probably less relevant for, say, Milwaukie High School. I'd love to see the district spend their money on getting bike buses stood up at our elementary school rather than putting money into a TDMP that maybe doesn't go very far. Now, we can't necessarily use this as the space for negotiating that, but I just kind of hate to see us enacting a requirement that's not really going very far. And so I think there's kind of there's just some practicality that kind of comes to my mind. Also, you know, Commissioner Edge, want to honor and appreciate you bringing up the comprehensive plan. In doing so, also just kind of glanced at it myself and, you know, recognize that, as you said, policy 10.7.6 talks about establishing a TDM program for schools and other large institutions and businesses. Kind of the overarching goal 10.7 talks about coordinating with local partners in planning for schools, medical facilities, and other institutional uses. And in some ways, I feel like this is coordination. This is the school district coming to us saying, we've done our research, we have more parking supply than we need, we don't hear from community complaints, and we are asking you to be a good partner and get rid of a requirement that is costing us time and money. So that's just some of my own perspective. I think I agree with the spirit of a lot of what you three shared, and I just wanted to share some of that perspective. And Commissioner Edge, I see your hand is back up, so maybe we can keep the discussion going.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's important that well, so first of all, I mean, yes, with costs, I think that the costs associated with the parking agreements should be, you know, done away with. That's not, you know, first, I don't think we can't require that. And, you know, they don't need to be spending money on things that aren't doing anything for them. I think the TDM program has value. And I think that, you know, and it's referenced in, you know, another policy as well, policy 8.2.2, encouraging increased use of transportation demand management programs to achieve community design patterns that are more sustainable. Now that finds itself in the parking design policies. It wasn't the first one I decided to, you know, to reference, but you know, there's multiple touch points in the comprehensive plan where policies where we're encouraging transportation demand management plan programs. And really, I think that I think it really you lose out on the opportunities here, you know, with getting the student body involved in helping with this decision making, and, you know, how are we using, you know, things, how are we using our land and resource, you know, parking resources, transportation resources efficiently and safely, meeting the needs of the students that are going there. And then, and the other part is that we don't know how demand is going to change and evolve. You know, we know that we've gotten back to near pre-pandemic levels of, you know, traffic. We don't know how that's going to grow as the population continues to grow, you know, over the next several years. And with all due respect to staff and kind of the legal opinion, you know, that was offered, I worry about the leverage that the city has, you know, with no TDM program in place, to, you know, bring the school back to the table to, you know, to really get a TDM program going again. And so I honestly feel like maintaining it really helps. I mean, again, I'll kind of read from the draft finding I was going to offer. Transportation demand management program will guarantee that the school monitors transportation demand and associated impacts on the surrounding neighborhood, and contemplates how to continue safely and efficiently using the local transportation system. I think that that's a great benefit, and I think that with that condition, with that TDM program, the Planning Commission can find that the public benefits of the existing school CSU continue to outweigh any negative impacts. And that's what does it for me, is making sure that they continue or having that active monitoring and includes the student body, you know, in those discussions. And that's how this is what I feel comfortable with, you know, approving this request today.
Great, thanks. Appreciate, the additional discussion and referencing some of the comprehensive plan parking policies as well. like I said, I think understand and value, personally value the spirit of a lot of that. I don't know if any other commissioners have any thoughts that they might want to share. Nothing from Commissioner Mulhorn and Commissioner Freeman. Okay. Well, then, how do we want to take this? Do we want to, I mean, it sounds like there's kind of unanimous agreement on the first item of eliminating kind of the, just got lost in my packet as I'm trying to find my way back up to where we're talking. Essentially the least space requirements. I think even if I were to make a passionate appeal, I probably will get myself outvoted on the second item. Is that fairly correct, commissioners? See some smirks.
Chair, I would say that I'm inclined to vote in favor of the proposed motion by Commissioner Edge.
Thank you, Vice Chair Freeman. I appreciate that.
And I would agree with that as well.
Agree with that. Great. Well, it sounds like we might not need any further discussion, and we might be ready for a motion that Commissioner Edge sounds ready to make.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to. So I move that we approve application CSU-2023-004 with the findings and recommended conditions of approval as recommended by staff, but amended 5.C.4 with the extra finding there reading a transportation demand management program will guarantee that the school monitors transportation demand and associated impacts on the surrounding neighborhood and contemplates how to continue safely and efficiently using the local transportation system. And then the final sentence would be modified to read, with a TDM program, the Planning Commission finds that the public benefits of the existing school CSU continue to outweigh any negative impacts.
Great. And I want to make sure that I heard you correctly, Commissioner Edge. I think you said that you were moving to moving kind of in support of staff's proposal. And staff's proposal is to eliminate the leased space and eliminate the TDMP, which I don't think is what you're proposing.
I'm amending this. I was amending the staff findings.
Okay.
Amending finding 5.C.4.
Okay.
But otherwise adopting the findings as distributed in the staff report.
Great. So we're all we're all clear that we're supporting A and denying B, I guess.
Correct.
Perfect. Well, it's been moved. Is it, do we have a second?
Second, Commissioner.
It's been seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Might I be able to sway some of my commissioners just on the practicality of the matter? Seeing none, appreciate your graciousness. So it's been moved to, I'll let you restate this, Commissioner Edge.
To approve CSU-2023-004 with amended findings from the staff report with 5.C.4, finding 5.C.4 amended. You want me to read it again?
I'm gonna look to Justin. Are we getting it right? I kind of want to cleave the two things apart and just like take them one at a time.
I think you guys have danced enough around it. I think we know what the motion
Great.
is.
Perfect. We know what the motion is. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. For the record, I'm opposed on the TDMP, not on the first part, nay. The ayes have it, 3 ayes, 1 nay. Application CSU-2023-004 as amended and read into the record is approved. If anyone wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision to City Council, you must make application stating the grounds for your appeal within 15 days of the mailing of the notice of decision. Please see Brett or Laura for details on that. All right, this is where I always want us to take an intermission, but we probably are like 2 minutes away from the close of the meeting. Any other planning department or commission business updates?
I don't have any at this time.
Nothing there. Forecast for future meetings?
We have no items for the October 24th meeting, and we have 2 items on November 14th. One, we have another CSU for a major modification for a daycare, for Sunshine Daycare, and then we're also going to talk about, we're going to have a work session on Title 17 land division.
Title 17. Exciting. Look at Commissioner Ed. She's can't wait. Great. Well, if there's anything else from planning commissioners, I don't have any updates courtesy of Greg Heemer, so apologies on that, Mr. Heemer. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn, Chair.
It's been moved.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Have a great night, gentlemen. Hope to see you in person in these beautiful facilities. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Night.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.